sometimes we make things that just cost too much time to make. Or at least too much time that people wouldn't pay to make it again, anyway. And that's this breadbox. I've been working on, or at least thinking about certain furniture ideas for a while, and sometimes it's just easier to make a scale version or a test part on something smaller, like a breadbox. If you hang around, I guess what you'd call a true furniture maker or makers for a while, they usually mention a few things that every aspiring furniture maker will end up wanting to make or will make, and that's usually chairs, rocking chairs, chairs of some sort. They seem to be fixated on chairs, and I would definitely fall within that box too. So don't get me wrong, but there's also a lane people, or I seem to have went down, and that's traditional cabinet making, the James Krevenovs of the world. And if you're like me, you'll find it quite the page turner. If you're normal, it'll put you right to bed. All to say, I've gotten fixated on tambour doors, and that's where this breadbox comes in. And they're one of those things for me I've always loved the look of, the design of, the function of. So I needed to do a little trial run before I started implementing it into larger pieces of furniture. And hence this supposedly simple breadbox turned into a time dump. And I didn't foresee that, being that every 90s household managed to have a breadbox in their house, or at least my family did, and every family I knew in my area did. So I underestimated how much time this would take. It's pretty severely. Anyway, you're probably wondering what I've been doing here with this MDF for the last 2 minutes. And the key with the tambour door is it rides on a track on the side of the breadbox. And there's probably a few different ways you could do this. I don't have a CNC, so I wasn't able to just rip off a template. So I'm making a few jigs here, and I'm going to be using brass bushings. I didn't know what brass bushings were for the longest time. You always hear people talk about pattern bits. And usually it's just a bit with a bearing on it that allows you to follow the pattern that you make. And they're pretty awesome. They're actually just super inexpensive, considering the price of trim bits. And I think they're way under discussed and utilized on YouTube anyway. So they work the exact same way as a trim bit. It works as like a bearing, but the brass bushing just follows along. So you can see here on the top, what I glued on was this is my pattern I'm going to use, and you could just have it fastened that right to your wall of your breadbox. The risk being that if you slipped on your actual piece, then you ruined it. But making a fixed jig that I'm making, it allows me to just do it repeatedly. My second bearing, which I'll use after this first bearing, will fit right in this groove I'm making, and allow me to just attach this to any future breadbox I want to make, and it just I can run this channel right through it. Super simple, quick. So the first breadbox is going to be way more time consuming, as I have to make these jigs, but future ones, if I decide to make one, should be a lot quicker. So how it's working is I'll use a large bearing and a large bit to make this first larger channel, and then this channel will fit a second smaller bearing, bushing, and then a 1/4 inch bit will fit through that bushing, allow me to cut a perfect channel on the inside of my breadbox. There must be other content on YouTube that shows you how to use these, but none that I've seen or looked for anyway. But if you want me to make one, I can make a quick one. They're pretty straightforward, but I guess this could be pretty confusing. But after I just soften up these edges here, you can see how this brass bushing just slides right in that groove. Easy peasy. I've had this nice piece of cherry sitting around my shop for years. I thought, okay, it's wide enough and should be able to make this whole breadbox in one piece. I won't have to glue up any panels to make it. And after thinking about it for a little bit, I thought it's kind of a waste of this nice piece of cherry. So I just decided to ixnay that and spend the time to glue up some panels. Another reason this breadbox took me so long was because I went in with zero design other than the door. That about the door and the door only. Just wanted to try to make one and have it be functional. Try to see what was possible. Follow a lot of people on Instagram that have made stunning cabinets with these beautiful tambour doors. They'll veneer a nice sheet and then they'll cut it so finely that when it's closed you can't tell. And I always wondered about that. After this experience, I have no idea how they do that because, especially on something this small, the channel that your door's following is it's such a tight radius that to keep something that square, this probably makes no sense. Trying to explain it verbally without an image. I'll try to snap something here. I've never done that before, but I'll put a picture of what I'm talking about. But when you open the door, the edges are still so sharp and square, and the radius of your channel for your door makes it impossible to slide smoothly. So you kind of have to end up rounding over all your edges, which takes away that perception that it's just still one panel. So all that to say that I figured out I'm able to glue up the panel and orient the grain so it looks like after it's all cut into slats, that it's all still one piece, but I was not able to accomplish the effect because I was required to round every corner to make the door actually functional. And if you're wondering what I'm doing here, I'm just, after I put the bead of glue down, I'm using the two boards to spread it out evenly. Used to be a technique, people just did that and then let it rest and claimed it was fully cured and be structurally sound as is. So add that to the old glue and clamp debate to see, maybe that's a test that should be performed to see if extensive pressure is really required to create a proper bond. I feel like there's a lot of talk online about pressure to get glue to bond properly, yada yada yada. But when you do a mortise and tenon, even when you clamp it, clamping is just holding it in place while the glue cures. Clamping a style rail system on a door with a floating mortise and tenon, that clamp is not putting pressure on the glue. That is just holding it in place while the glue cures. So there's no added pressure on the surface of the glue. This is something you see people argue about all the time. What's your opinion? I mean, painter's tape is a pretty good clamp. Anyway, here you can see I'm using my template I made, attaching it to my side panel of my breadbox, using my brass bushing in that slot and letting my 1/4 inch bit go through to cut my channel for my tambour door. And this is another great thing about using brass bushings are when you create templates, you can kind of use any kind of bit you want. I mean, it's really only limited by your imagination. You can probably create all kinds of cool things with creating different templates that the bushings are going to be riding in, and then using like dovetail bits, lock key bits, door handle bits. I mean, you can there's probably lots of things you can create with this. That's one of the awesome things about woodworking and following other people's content is people's creativity is endless, and people make a lot of cool things with ideas and tools that you didn't think should be used that way, or you didn't consider that as one of the ways that it could be used. Anyway, so now that we have the template made, all the parts for the box glued up and cut out, we get to the show, the making of the tambour door. And since we decided against using that live edge piece of cherry, I was able to just go through my offcuts and find some smaller pieces that I thought paired well together. You saw me there ripping them on the table saw. I believe I was just cutting them a 1/2 inch by 3/4. And then there I was laying them out to visualize the finished door. And one of the key parts of making the tambour door is making sure that when you glue your canvas to the back of the panel, that all your little slats are held firmly and tightly together to give you that smooth sliding door motion. And if you're going to attempt this on your own, this jig I'm making has 0 measurements involved. It's just a sheet of MDF that I didn't even glue it, just screwed down a fence to the bottom and then made sure that these sides and the top were all 90 degrees to each other. And then making sure you leave a decent sized gap on the right or left side so that you can create a wedge system to hammer in to force all of your slats tight to each other. That way when you put the canvas, there's no gaps there for the glue to seep down and to kind of lock the whole door together. Because the goal here is to have only the back of the door adhering to the canvas. If glue seeps down in between any gaps you have in the slots, then it's just going to glue those together, and then it won't have that smooth rolling motion. And you can see there, I didn't screw on that last right side rail on the MDF until I made sure that my wedge system was going to have enough room to get that really tight. So that's just kind of the last thing that you add on. And then here I'm putting tape on the edges that are going to go into my tracks of the breadbox so that there's no glue stuck here and there's no canvas. So this is what I will be cutting a dado into to fit inside my side panels of my breadbox. And let me know what you think. Am I giving too much information, not enough information? I'm not sure really what the audience of this channel is right now. If people are watching these builds to try to remake it, get ideas for their own things. If most people are already experienced woodworkers that are going to be telling me all the things I'm doing wrong. But let me know. I can talk more, talk less, try to give some more insight into what I'm doing, or if you're just kind of listening along or muting me. Either way, thanks for watching though. And here I am finally applying the canvas to the back of the door. I did quite a bit of research trying to find out what the recommended type of canvas is. And after that research and looking at different things online, I ended up just deciding to go with a painter's drop cloth. It was like a medium to heavy duty cotton cloth. I think the main thing is that when it stretches, it only stretches in one direction so that you can get it to be tight and it's not going to loosen up over time. So I think I found the right product, hopefully. It's been working so far. And if you're wondering why I have a bunch of tape on this, it's just the left and right side of the box. I thought it was easiest just to tape it together to cut it. That way both these corners I'm going to do that follow the same radius as the groove for my door are the same on both sides. And then just making sure that as I'm sanding it that they're still square. Because sometimes you can sand it, not pay attention and look, and then you've just created a big ski slope on the inside of that. And I think that's a video that I want to do down the road is on sanders. I mean, you see everyone on YouTube using a Festool or a Merca sander, and there's a reason for that. There's a strong reason for that. But you can get away with not having one of those. But I was lucky enough when I started in this woodworking journey that like 10 years ago, I got on with a shop with a team of woodworkers that have been doing it their whole lives. And sanding was one of the things that they hammered home with me for a whole year. Because it was a shop that it wasn't a mass production shop and it wasn't a cabinet shop. We made a lot of custom dining room tables and I did a lot of the sanding. There's a lot of tricks that I had zero understanding of before I got into that level of work. And I would say probably 95% of the population would see a table that Joe Blow sanded and probably wouldn't pick up on what a professional woodworker would, or, a seasoned woodworker might notice when you're looking for things. So, you could do a whole video on just the little intricacies of how to sand, what you're looking for, how to make it perfect, why people use different finishes for different things. It's a whole world. But sanding, it can make a massive difference in the finished product. And another side note, if you're a new woodworker and you've made your first table, coffee table, something where you've actually jointed or made a square edge and a square top and glued a panel together and you're thinking, how did this turn out? Get yourself a straight edge and go and lay it across the top and see, because sometimes I've met lots of people who are like, this is a fantastic table, and this is including me when I was young, made a table and I'm like, this is a great table. And then you find out what a straight edge is, and you lay a straight edge across that table, and you're like, holy moly, I made a half pipe. And I know I said young there, and that kind of sounds silly saying, oh, when I was young, but I mean, you know, 12, 14 years ago when I found a piece of pine and I glued it together and I made a table, or, no one ever makes something out of a pallet. I definitely didn't. When those things happen, you get something that's soaking rain wet and you think, feels dry. It's been in my garage for 1 week. This will work. And if you've been a furniture maker for 5, 10 plus years, you start getting those custom inquiries where someone's like, I cut down this oak tree in my backyard and it's been sitting in my basement for 1 year. Can you make a table? Buy a book on how to dry wood, and you will soon realize that that ain't long enough. So what do you think is going to happen to that week-old pallet that's been sitting behind Home Depot for the last 6 months? And there's absolutely zero shade on pallet stuff. I mean, any kind of wood you can get to try to figure out how to make things, learn. I'm a big advocate for pine. Get a nice piece of dry pine. Or I think there's a lot of woodworkers out there, myself included, that have shops and you have so much offcuts and scrap pieces that they'll just donate them to you. I mean, if you live in my area, there's easily a box of nice hardwood that you could make lots of furniture out of, that a lot of guys like me are, I'm sure, more than happy to donate to you to learn. Anyway, here you can see me using this block plane to chamfer all the edges, because this is when I realized that it wouldn't run smoothly in that track, keeping it as square as it was, so I was required to heavily round all the corners to have that smooth transition along that tight radius to make the door fully functionable. Functionable. And what you saw me doing right there was, with this 8-year-old can of dried Minwax wax, I just used a torch to heat it up, and it reduces the friction of the wood-on-wood contact here, adds a little layer of protection, prevents from binding and squeaking, and just helps that door slide smoothly. And at this point, I've successfully finished making the door, and it works, but I'm trying to make it look a little more aesthetically pleasing, having not anticipated having to round over the slats as much as I had to make it transition smoothly, going up and down the rails of the box. I wanted to add something else to make it stand out more and look less like just a generic box and door. And here I am just fine-tuning the inside portion of the door that's going to be riding inside that rail. Using a file, I'm able to round them over, make it a little more smooth inside that track, and adding wax definitely helps with that. And I believe at the start of the video I expressed how little I thought I put into this box. Here I am thinking of another pull option. There was probably an hour video portion where I made a hand-shaped pull that I just didn't like the look of, and I scrapped that. Went to that brass one, scrapped that too. And here I am. I made the box taller than I should have, which left a pretty big gap on the top of the tambour door, so I added that little piece of cherry there to kind of create a lower profile for the door so that the clearance was much less. And before, when you saw me drawing that half moon on the front of the door, this is what it was for. I've been getting into a lot of textured finishes on wood, and I've had this Kutzall burr for years that I've never used, and I thought this would be a good point to try it, test it out, see what it adds to the overall aesthetic of the piece, and I think it looks pretty good. Let me know what you think. And those Kutzall tools are pretty cool. I have a few other ones, and that one worked really well. I just stuck it in my router. They're typically used in rotary tools, but I'll attach a link down below in case anyone's wondering what that is, what the brand is, what other stuff they kind of sell. They're pretty handy tools. And when the bottom of this isn't going to be visible, I just I cut a dado in there for my back panel. And a lot of people just either don't use a back panel or they'll put it at the very back. But where this is going to be, the idea of this piece is going to be incorporated into a larger cabinet that is going to be almost exactly in this perspective that you're looking at now. The door is going to be rotating in this fashion. They're going to have to be able to be slid behind the back panel so that when it's opened and you're functionally using the cabinet, that you're not going to be able to see the back canvas portion of the door. I want it to be, just as pretty inside as it is outside. So when you're opening that door, that tambour door kind of sneaks behind that back panel and has a nice finished look when it's opened. And then here was another error I made when making this piece. You can see that this brass pole, I drilled the 3/4 inch hole that's required for the pull right in between two slats. So when you open it, there's no way that it's going to be able to keep it in place. And then I realized that I kind of like the look of it without anything. So if I just softened the corners and left the natural hole, I think it's kind of a nice little look. So that's what I ended up going with. I scrapped 2 pull options and went with just, a beautiful hole. So there you go. And I'm using the Osmo LED oil again. I've been really enjoying it. I think you can build up a nice quick multiple layer sheen to it. And I like it. It has a little more of the industrial look than a standard straight Osmo oil, like the traditional hardbox oil. So I'm kind of a fan of that. So decided to use it again. And this was going to end up being a Christmas gift that was on a time crunch. So I thought I can kind of really add multiple layers of finish to this thing in the same day. And so I did. And when I bought the oil setup, I just bought the least expensive option you could get into for the lights. I didn't want to invest the exorbitant amount of money that's required in the large light for the system so to start off with. So I went with this, and the only downside, it works really well, is the battery kind of uses up pretty quickly. It's enough to do a full table, but on that other video where I had the multiple leaves, the base and the top, it did die on me. I had to set it aside, recharge it, and do it again. But that would just be a process you'd have to plan appropriately to do the top at one section, let the battery charge for an hour, and then do the base. Is what I would suggest. And if you were curious as to what I was doing there with that blue painter's tape, I like to finish smaller pieces like this. Specifically, I even do larger pieces the same way. I finish the inside before assembling it. And the painter's tape just covers up the domino holes and any portion that you're going to apply glue to from being affected by the finish, which would impede the glue from adhering the two pieces together. So it's just a backup safety measure to make sure that everything's glued properly. And as this box is going to be a gift for my wife for Christmas, it was made for a specific spot in our kitchen. So I didn't put a whole lot of thought into the actual overall shape and design of it. I just knew that I wanted it to have that door. So it ended up being a lot taller than I had put a lot of thought into. But it ended up working out nicely because I thought, well, if I put a dowel in there, I can stand the bread up lengthwise, and then I can put more in there, and the dowel will keep it from flopping out when you open the door. So I think this ended up being a win in the long run. I like the function of it. And here I am back at adding some more woodworker art. Just thought I'd add some more texture to it, play around with this fun cut saw bit some more, see what I could end up making this box look like. I considered covering the entire thing in this textured finish. Mainly ran out of time, but I think it ended up being the best option. I'm not sure, what do you think? Would a full textured box like this look nice? Is this just a full fail? Or did it end up turning out pretty good for an unplanned, unthought out piece that took a lot of time and would have cost a lot of money to make if I was trying to sell it? Because there's a lot of people out there looking for a multi-$1,000 breadbox, I'm sure. Because someone like me, especially who's doing this for a living, typically making everything custom for clients that are paying for something, spending time on something like this, it's hard not to think about, well, if I were trying to do this to sell? How long did it take me? What would I have to sell it for to make it worth my time? And this was one of those things where this just took a lot of shop hours and would have cost I would have had to ask a big ticket price for this to be worth my while, in the sense of just making a cabinet or a table instead. But I mean, it was super fun. Love the way it looks. I'm a big fan. I've always loved cherry. I think it's beautiful. So let me know what you think. Did this turn out all right? What would you pay for this? Please don't say $50.